What's up, Spiceheads? Welcome back to yet another great video meetup. Today sponsored by Trusted Tech Team. We're going to be talking all about Windows Server 2019, including everything that you need to know to be considering a move, including both features and licensing. So without further ado, we got a great panel of experts for y'all today, including an IT pro from the Spiceworks community, as well as a couple of experts from Trusted Tech Team. So without further ado, let's go ahead and kick things off with a round of introductions. Batting first, come to us from the Spiceworks community. Please welcome Mr. Kevin Ackerace. Kevin, how's it going today?
Very good, thanks.
Kevin, do you mind telling us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Okay, I'm IT manager for a manufacturing company here in Londonderry, New Hampshire called Admix. We manufacture industrial mixers for the food, pharmaceutical, and beverage industry. And I've been here for 8 years.
Awesome, very cool. And Kevin, it was a close call this morning. We almost didn't have you. You experienced a pretty late outage, but luckily you made it. How are you feeling, given all that this morning?
I'm feeling pretty good now. Now that that's behind me, it's always the sigh of relief.
All right. Well, we are excited to have you, and we're looking forward to hearing from you. Our next panelist from Trusted Tech Team is Mr. David Spencer. David, welcome to the show today. How's it going?
Hey guys, good. Doing well. It's supposed to be a sunny day in California, but it is raining once every 6 months or so that it does here. But
caught you on a rain day. David, do you mind telling us a little bit about yourself and what you do for Trusted Tech Team?
Yeah, absolutely. So my role here is the Director of Operations. What that boils down to, it's my responsibility to make sure our customers have a smooth experience with us. That entails a couple things. One is to kind of simplify all of the convoluted information licensing that comes down from Microsoft and everyone else, and get it presented in a way where it's digestible, along with training our staff and making sure that they're able to work with our customers on a constructive basis and basically make everyone happy.
All right, very cool. Well, thanks for joining us, David. We are looking forward to hearing from you. And last but not least, we've got the CEO of Trusted Tech Team also on the line today, Mr. Julian Hamoud. Julian, welcome to the show today. How's it going?
Good. Thank you, Justin.
Absolutely. Julian, in addition to calling all the shots, bossing David around, etc., what else are your responsibilities at Trusted Tech Team, particularly when it comes to things like Windows Server?
Yeah, definitely. So primarily, again, just started the company in 2016. Other than like closing the blinds, writing things on notes that really have no correlation to anything we're doing, and making it seem like I'm busy, we've essentially established a company that just makes Microsoft licensing manageable for everyone. We've studied the licensing top to bottom, and then just trying to make it understood by everyone, whether you're small shop or a large enterprise.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I think this is a great panel. We should have an excellent show. Before we go any further, a couple things I did want to point out to you guys. We've got a lot of great resources. David sent over some really good stuff. So if you guys want to check that out, it should go a long ways as far as helping you in your Windows Server 2019 journey. If you guys have any questions for our panel, make sure to get them into our Q&A widget that you'll see down below. We'll be taking your questions later on in the show. Just as also a special shout out to those folks who are participating in chat. I see a lot of our favorite folks, including Native Texan, who brought me a pie at Spice World last year. I still think about that pie regularly. I see Brian and CA, Edit, all of our favorites. Just remember that if you do participate in chat, to make sure to adhere to our community guidelines, as this is an extension of the Spiceworks community, and making sure that everybody is having a positive professional experience. And as a special thank you for hanging out with us today, our prize for today is going to be, for one of you lucky attendees, an MSI Gaming NVIDIA long list of numbers, 8 gigabytes, 256-bit graphics card. So you will be announcing the winner of that graphics card at the end of the show, as well as taking your questions. We'll just get right into it, but be sure to stick around. All right, let's get started. So Julian, I think we'll start off with you. Windows Server 2019. It's people have been talking about it for a while, but you guys, it's your job to kind of dig into this and help customers figure out what it is we need to know. What in your opinion, are the things that are the most exciting that you're looking forward to?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Justin. So you guys, we looked at the entire feature set released with Server 19, and we tried to pinpoint features that were unique and we've never seen before. I wanted to start with Windows Admin Center. So for those who have not experimented with Server 19 yet, Windows Admin Center is a web application that consolidates your local applications. Some of the most popular ones that people are using, again, Server Manager, your Hyper-V Manager, failover clusters, Windows 10 client machines, all accessible through this web application. Now, it's locally deployed, it's a super lightweight application, and there's no tie-in with Azure Cloud Dependency. So it's literally an on-premise application. And what you do is you publish your Windows Admin Gateway to the internet, and you can connect to the server from anywhere. It gives you, if you guys have ever experimented with Azure, just seen the Azure dashboard, it's very similar to what Azure looks like, but again, it's just all the statistics on your on-premise server. It has many points of integration with Azure services like Azure AD, Azure Backup, and Azure Site Recovery. And we also have a link in the sidebar. It's an intro video that we found. It's about 3 minutes or so, and it displays some of the primary features of Windows Admin Center. So you guys check this out. This has been the biggest thing we've seen on any Windows Server release yet. Diving into some other features we found that were extremely important, System Insights. So it's been available prior, but there are such new models that analyze system data now and give administrators insight into system health. The 4 that we saw that were most beneficial, CPU and network capacity, along with total storage and volume consumption forecasting. There were also changes to HCI, hyperconverged infrastructure, with the majority of those changes occurring in storage spaces direct. So now you have better support for commodity disks, persistent memory and compression capabilities. And they actually, the network subsystem is now designed to operate at 40 gigabits per second. Never seen anything like that before. Taking a swing over to the security side, there was a volume of features released on the security side, but we tried to dumb it down into the 2 that we found were most important. Number 1, finally, Linux shielded VMs. So you have shielded VMs running Linux, and again, the primary function that we could see in the documentation we reviewed and playing with the actual shielded VMs were unauthorized access by other Hyper-V host administrators. And lastly, on the support side, there's now support for Windows Defender ATP. So you guys have seen that on the Windows 10 side. They're now moved over to Server 19, so that is now available.
Awesome, very cool. Kevin, I'm not sure if we lost you temporarily, but was there? You guys are looking. Kevin, are you there? Otherwise, we'll move on to David. We'll just keep on going. See if he can.
He didn't fix it. He put a Band-Aid on it.
We're back. Okay, Kevin. I don't know how much of that you caught, but you guys are actually...
I caught all of it. I just don't know why my video disappeared.
Okay.
So.
Good. Okay, so Julian or Kevin, can you talk to us? So you guys are currently looking at Windows Server 29. You're relatively early on in your exploration. Can you talk to us a little bit about your current situation and what you guys are looking forward at 2019 specifically around?
Yes. Well, I've been putting together a server, the virtual 2019 server, and we're looking forward to taking advantage of the group policies that we can set for our Windows 10 machines. Since we finally got everybody up to Windows 10, we found that we're losing a lot of the security options of Windows 10 with our current domain controller being 2008. So we're really looking forward to being able to push some of that stuff out.
Okay. And what's your kind of timeline that you're looking at? Have you guys been playing around with it just yet, or is this kind of something that you're in the middle of planning?
Yeah, we have a small stumbling block. We most of our users were set up with a space in their username, so first name, space, last name, and it seems to be giving us a little bit of headache in other fronts. So we want to rectify that before we migrate to to a new environment. So we don't know if we want to start from scratch or what. Mm-hmm. And really looking for somebody that ran into the same situation or similar, and what the best approach is to move forward with that.
And Kevin, what have you found to be helpful as far as your research? Is it really just downloading it and playing around with it, or have you found other resources to be helpful as well?
Just basically, reading whatever's available online and, talking with some of our peers at Spice Core meetings and, um, the Trusted Tech Partners team, their site is giving me some great information. So,
All right, very cool. Let's talk next about licensing. David, we'll go to you next. Can you talk to us about what folks should expect from a licensing perspective? I know that moving to Server 2016, that was a bit of a shift with going to the per core model. Can we expect more of the same when it comes to 2019?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, licensing Server 19, it can get complicated. But on the base level, it's decently simple. There are kind of three things that you want to keep an eye out for, or three requirements that you need to satisfy. The first one is satisfying the core requirement, like you just mentioned, starting with Server 16, and it's going to be the same with Server 19. We're on the core model, so we have to license the number of cores on a physical machine in order to satisfy that requirement, with the two stipulations of there's a minimum of 16 cores required, and then a minimum of 8 cores per socket. So as long as you use those two to determine how many cores you need to license for the physical machine, that number gets defined as a single license. That's something we will come back to, but that's basically the core requirement in a gist of it. The second step is licensing the CAL, and then the third is licensing the remote desktop CAL. These are pretty similar, so I'm going to go ahead and group them together as far as explanation goes. But the first part of this is determining what are the qualifying scenarios on CALs. Basically, what counts. You're going to find a lot of misconceptions around this, a lot of discussions. I swear there's a thread on SpiceWorks every other day that goes over this. The most common scenarios we see are just using a server as like a file server or Active Directory. That's going to necessitate the need for CAL. That's going to cover most people and what they're using it for. The rule of thumb that I like to go with for a simple explanation is if someone can use the device, generally you're going to need a CAL. Printers count, and printers do need CAL. The technical requirement for it goes is whether that device requires an authentication with the server. And this is the reason why the web server role does not count. It's not a qualifying scenario. So if you set up a web server and you obviously have that open to the internet, you don't need a CAL for every single person that ends up touching your site. Looking at the remote desktop CALs and the qualifying scenarios there, the simplest explanation I can go with is if you're utilizing mouse and keyboard control. A huge misconception with the need for remote desktop CALs is a lot of people think because they're just inside of the network, they don't need the CALs, which unfortunately isn't accurate. So that's something that kind of messes with people's count. But that's the next thing we have to do. Now that we know the qualifying scenarios, how do you count? How many CALs of each do you need? The important thing is number one, it's unique. It's not concurrent. A lot of people come in saying, well, I only have 5 people ever touching at a time server, so I only need 5, right? No, unfortunately, that's not the case. But that's actually why Microsoft provides 2 different licensing models. So really important piece here as well is it's important to know there's no technical right answer with this. When you go for user or device, it's just the right answer is, well, what's going to be cost effective for you? So keeping that in mind, for each of the CALs, or the CALs and remote desktop CALs, we have user or device as an option. Whenever I talk about user or device, I always like to go into why user or device. Microsoft wanted to set a system in place where no one really gets left behind, or no one is kind of paying unfairly based on how they're using how you're using their environment. Everyone pretty much fits comfortably either in the user bucket or the device bucket as far as what's cost effective. Um, as Julian knows, I'm kind of an analogy guy. I always like to use little anecdotes to show, to explain points. The user case I wanted to go over is say you have a small business that has mobile salespeople. Say you have 5 administrative staff, and they each have their own desk at the office. And then say you have 10 salespersons, they have their desk at the office too, but then they also each have a laptop that they take out with them on the road. If you total that up, that's either 15 unique users or that's 25 unique devices. So in that case, you could purchase either 15 user cals or 25 device cals. Well, 15 user cals is going to be cheaper, so that's what you want to go with. All that I just went over is also included in there's a PDF in the sidebar on kind of a quick reference on licensing Windows Server 2019 that you guys can keep on file. That will help for a lot of these scenarios.
Cool. David, can you talk to us a little bit more about the per core change? I know this was they caused a little bit of consternation when 2016 when it was announced. Can you talk to us a little bit more about the reasoning for this change, at least in your opinion?
Yeah, absolutely. Because what we notice is a lot of the IT pros that come back to us asking about the licensing, it changed since the last time they did it, and before that, it changed again since the last time they did it. So they keep wondering, hey, why does Microsoft keep changing this stuff? And the reason why, honestly, is because technology improves over time. When Microsoft sets these licensing models in place, they're setting it in place utilizing or knowing what the current technology landscape is. If you look at that, we've gone from per server to per CPU and then to per core. But if you take a look at when per server was the licensing model, multi-socket servers weren't as prevalent. Same thing happened when it was the per CPU model. Those high core count CPUs didn't really exist. You didn't have the 10 core CPUs going on. So as technology changed, loopholes in the licensing became more prevalent. So what Microsoft basically has done is just drilled down to a smaller unit of measurement, but tried to keep the threshold the same. Looking at the 3 licensing models, recently we've had the per server, which was a minimum of 1 server, obviously. Then with the move to the per CPU up to 2012 R2, it was a 2 CPU minimum. And then starting with 16 and then obviously 19, you have the 16 core minimum. If you compare all of those 3, they're pretty much on the same playing field. So while it kind of seems like Microsoft has said, oh no, you need to license, much more, spend a lot more, it didn't end up being that huge of a change for most people. We find there are very little people, 5% that pay more on a new level than an older one. So yeah, it seems like something that was a huge change, but it makes sense as technologies progressed.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, like you had said, there were instances where folks may have been kind of exploiting a loophole. Did you guys find, on the whole, that your customers were significantly impacted financially from this licensing change, or was it relatively minor?
It was really minor. I mean, the amount of people who come to us and say, for example, that they have a 2-socket more than 16 core system, that is a case that would be affected. That is 1 in 20, maybe. It's not that many.
Okay. Kevin, let's talk to you next. You guys have been obviously planning to move to 2019. I think you had looked at 2016 as well. Did this change to the per core licensing model? Well, what was the ultimate impact for you guys?
My recollection was minimal because we did do a 2016, and we had to re-up our software assurance last year, and I was looking at our scale infrastructure having 60 cores, and I was like, oh my god, what's that going to do to me? And it didn't seem
Kevin,
to
you
be
there?
that drastic of a change.
We'll
So
come back to him next. Julian, let's talk to you next. And I think Kevin was going to go into this, but around, am I gone? Okay.
Yeah.
Kevin, sorry, Julian, can you talk to us about how virtualization impacts this? Because, with different, obviously, this is another shift in the way that people are utilizing technology. How does virtualization impact the licensing?
Yeah, Justin, going back to Kevin, and so we were having discussions with Kevin yesterday in regards to his environment. Yeah, Justin, I think it's on your side. We can hear Kevin good. But Kevin, just diving back into that. Yeah, that's perfect. Diving back into the last question. So your environment, do you guys have 3 hosts, each with 20 cores each?
yes,
Okay. So you essentially you came from 2012 R2, correct, into 2016 recently, within the last 12 months or so?
yes,
So in this environment, if we were to look at the 2012 R2 versus the 2016, the 2012 R2 was per 2 processors per license. The only difference, so when Server 16 was released, it came in that the 16 core variation was the starter, minimum requirement. In Kevin's situation, he would only have to increase the licensing by 4 cores, or approximately around $250. So it wasn't something that was breaking the budget. And again, 250 per host. A lot of people actually were really apprehensive of moving to 2016 because of the change. But when it came down to it, based on even our discussions with our customers and what David was explaining, very, very few customers were actually heavily impacted. It was just those with massive databases. Yeah, so again, Kevin, that was a prime example. So,
Okay,
but diving back into, oh no,
I was going to say, yeah, I apologize if I cut Kevin off. I lost my feed, but it sounded like everyone else could hear and see each other just fine. So,
I was done.
I'm sorry for that, Kevin.
Kevin gives you guys the networking issues.
Yeah. Okay, so, and then Julian, did you already finish talking about the virtualization?
No, I wanted to dive into, again, virtualization, how that affects licensing. What it comes down to is pretty much how many virtual machines is required for the environment. Now, someone like Kevin's example, Kevin, your hypervisor, are you guys using ESXi or do you use Hyper-V? Or
Scale has their own hypervisor. I don't know what it is. Some
cool, okay.
Linux based whatever.
You're on Scale, right? So that's the KVM.
Scale, yeah.
Yeah,
KVM,
so.
yeah.
Cool. So you guys, we want to look at different versions of Windows Server and which would apply to environments. And when we're looking at actual virtual machines and virtualization licensing rights, we want to primarily focus on standard and data center. The reason being is Windows Server Essentials has no virtualization. It's just primarily to get small companies onto Active Directory and build foundations from there. So with Windows Server Standard, it's really low density or lightly virtualized environments. Data center is highly virtualized. So with a data center license, it allows for unlimited virtual machines on that one host. Now, we want to always determine the cost effectiveness between standard and data center. I wanted to give like a scenario to overview. So let's say Kevin's host machine, 20 cores. Let's say we have like 4 VMs. The allotment of cores per VM, let's say we have 4 on 2 VMs and 2 on the last 2. Now, when looking at that, it's 12 cores on the VMs, but when licensing Windows Server Standard and when licensing Data Center, we want to ensure that we license the entire host, so all 20 cores on that host. Now, when we have virtual machines, Windows Server Standard allows for activation of 2 virtual machines. Now, when we have a 3rd and 4th virtual machine, the question that always comes up is, let's say VM3 and VM4 have the 2 cores each. The question that always comes up is, why am I still licensing the host machine? So in the Microsoft licensing, what it is you essentially have to license up to the host cores, no matter the allotment of cores on the VM. So in Kevin's scenario, if we were to go Windows Server Standard, we have 4 VMs. We would need quantity 2 of a 20-core license. Now, looking at the data center side, we always evaluate the environments to see if it makes sense for them to go into data center or not. And around 14 and a half, so 15 VMs, it's more cost effective to go into data center. Under 14 or with little growth anticipated, go with Server Standard and just continue to procure multiple copies of Server Standard. So hopefully that was helpful. I know it gets a little confusing when licensing the cores on the host machine over and over again, but that's a simple breakdown.
Okay, cool. Let's talk next, David, about software assurance. I know this is something that a lot of folks purchase, and can you talk to us about, if you are on software assurance, how does this impact your potential move to 2019?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the huge benefits of software assurance is upgrade rights to any existing versions or any new versions that are released while your subscription is active. So for those of you that are running older versions currently, you basically already have the licensing. So you can basically move up to Server 19 without paying anything extra. So that's nice. If you're looking at licensing a brand new environment and you're going to start looking at how to license it, then you have a few different options, but software assurance is really nice because it will give you those upgrade rights moving forward, especially if you are one of the guys who likes to stay with the times. That is huge. There's a few benefits of software assurance I actually do want to go over because it helps determine what licensing you ended up going with. The big one is the active passive redundancy installation rights. Basically, when you procure open license with software assurance versus without, software assurance allows you to install on a second passive server, also technically a third server for disaster recovery. That way you have high availability between the active passive, and then if one of those goes down, you can pull in the DR server and get that spun up and have your redundancy right back. It's a huge benefit that you get with software assurance. You don't have to procure extra licensing for it. Past that, huge benefit is the Azure Hybrid benefit. Now, obviously, Microsoft is pushing Azure quite a bit, and I would say the adoption a few years back it was a little harder to justify, but they've put out a couple of incentives on it. One is when renting a Windows Server instance through Azure, if you have active software assurance, you can get up to about a 40% discount on that hosting. So if you're looking to start to hybridize your environment from going purely on-prem, you get a huge savings there. The second piece, and this is something that is really nice with software assurance, is you can do the bring your own licensing. When you have an active SA along paired with standard, you can bring your own license to the Azure environment. But if you've licensed with Data Center, and this is huge, is you can utilize that licensing both on-prem and in Azure as bring your own licensing. So in theory, with a Data Center license with SA, you'd be able to install active, passive disaster recovery and then bring that license to Azure as well. So that just extends basically extends your investment quite a bit. That's a huge help. It should definitely factor in when you're looking at how to procure the Windows Server, whether it's open license, whether it includes software assurance, whether you go, it comes OEM bundled with hardware you get or retail. There's all different levels and different sets of benefits that you get.
Cool. Julian, given that you guys are licensing experts, what have you guys seen as some common ways to keep costs down during the licensing when you're licensing an environment?
Yeah, I wanted to review just the different licensing options and picking a licensing option that works best for your company now and with future growth accounted for. So I wanted to review the 4 licensing options with some basic pros and cons of each, starting with OEM. So OEM, again, lives and dies with the machine. You have no support with OEM licensing. The second model is going to be retail. Now, retail licenses, you have the reinstallation rights for that specific version, and you also get 1 year of support for Microsoft. The third model is going to be open licensing. And for those who have not heard of open licensing, it's also called open business. And what this allows you to do is you get the newest version. So in this case, you get Server 19, and you get downgrade rights to the 2 prior versions. So Server 16 and Server 2012 R2. The fourth model is going to be what Kevin currently has. It's open licensing plus software assurance. Covers all the benefits of software assurance that David just discussed. Alongside, again, the downgrade rights, you have those upgrade rights. With Active SA, if a new version of Windows Server is released within 24 months, you'll get complimentary upgrade rights. And again, you can continue to renew your software assurance as Kevin did about 12 months ago. Now, looking at the different scenarios of where each would be applicable, looking at an OEM is typically procured when you buy a new server. Dell or HP, you have a bare bones server, have a limited budget, and you typically have the same server OS. You don't really upgrade that frequently. So that would be a case where we would recommend OEM licensing. Now, retail licensing, let's say you have a 5-year run life, typical for a lot of your servers. You're buying new hardware more frequently, and you just need to, this is like your first server installation. You might need support. You might need assistance with getting it up to speed. Go retail. The support is actually much, much better than it used to be. We've used it before, so rock solid, go retail. Now, looking at open licensing, where this would be applicable would be if you have like Windows Server 2008, 2008 R2, and you want to slowly upgrade into new versions. For example, you have an application that runs exclusively on Server 2008 R2. You've developed the application, upgraded it, but you don't want to move to the newest version. So you want to slowly piece together like 2012 R2, you upgrade it into there. A year later, you go into 2016, etc. That would be an example for open licensing. Now, open licensing plus SA, you want to install Server 19 now, or maybe even Server 16, but the organization and yourself typically like to roll with the newer versions of Windows Server. In that case, open licensing and SA. Also, again, as David mentioned, if you're going to move it into a cloud environment like Azure, the SA will allow you to do so. So you have flexibility of on-premise or moving it into the cloud. If it's something on the agenda in the next few years, add SA onto there, reap the benefits of it.
Okay. David, can you walk us through like a hypothetical licensing scenario? Maybe what some common licensing applications have been that you guys have worked on.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of different, obviously, scenarios I could try and walk through. The one I like to use, I feel like everyone can relate a little bit, is an example, a medical clinic. I mean, we've all been to the doctor, right? So what we have here is a medical clinic, and what they're trying to do is set up a file server so they can access patient records. And they want to access documents on a system from reception, let's say 2 private offices and 7 exam rooms. So that's a total of 10 different systems. Then as far as employees go, 4 receptionists, 2 nurses, 6 doctors, that would put us at 30 unique employees. So they come to you and say, okay, we have a bare bones server with no OS. So now, first thing, number one, is we need to evaluate which edition we can go with. Because they have over 25 users, that removes Essentials as an option. Because the Essentials, the capacity is the first of either 25 users or 50 devices. And that's something that's actually detailed out in the capacities table in that licensing guide, by the way. But knowing that, now we have to look at licensing either standard or Essentials. So step 1 is licensing the cores. They tell you the server is 2-socket. Any CPU is 8 cores. That's a total of 16. So based on that, we're going to go ahead and license 16 cores because 16 is the minimum, and it's 8 minimum per CPU, which are both satisfied there. Step 2 is the CALs, the standard CALs. So we know there are 30 unique employees or 10 devices. Because the count is based on unique and not concurrent, we know that we can either purchase 10 device CALs or 30 user CALs. Well, 10 device CAL is going to be cheaper, so that's going to be the best way to go there. Step 3 is the need for remote desktop CALs. Now they tell you that they're not really going to need to remote into the server other than administrative duties. Now this is something people ask us all the time. A lot of people know that Windows Server comes with 2 admin CALs. Basically, those are really, really loosely defined. But what that basically means is you're able to remote into the server to perform administrative duties like updates, reboots, that kind of thing. And that can be accomplished without installing the the remote desktop session host role. As soon as you install that role, that's when you need to look into procuring remote desktop CALs, and then you can exceed that 2 limit. If you ever need to go over that, you have to purchase as many CALs as you need. Those 2 don't really transfer over. So knowing that, they don't need to purchase remote desktop CALs. So taking all that into account, and we know also they're not going to be doing any virtualization, they'll need server 19 standard, 16 core license with 10 device CALs.
Cool.
So that's kind of how an example consultation process would go. And obviously we would talk about things like, okay, are you looking to expand the office? Are you looking to cut back on employees to make sure we, push someone in the right direction as far as, present and future is concerned?
Cool. And then Julian, one last question before we go to questions from the audience. It would be around, all this has been really fantastic, helpful information. What more does the Trusted Tech team help out with your customers? Is it predominantly just licensing consultation? Do you guys also help with migration or other consultation services as well?
Yeah, so just wanted to give one more example. So where TTT plays along like IT pros, it's similar to like going to a restaurant and you sit down, the server comes up to you, you turn to her and you show her the menu. This is going to be good. So you turn and you ask the menu, look at the menu and say, hey, how's the steak here? And she says, I've never had it. I'm sorry. Well, how about the salmon? I don't like seafood that much. Well, what about the chicken? I'm vegan. So where I'm going with this is, regardless whether you buy from us or not, we're going to help you like in the consultation process. We know what we're talking about. We're heavily engaged in the licensing. So again, if you decide to shop with us or you don't decide to shop with us, take the information, make a better assessment on the environment, and take it from there. So we break down and translate what you need to know in simple terms. Again, if you're only doing this once every few years, the change in Microsoft licensing from year to year and version to version makes it so complex to actually try to pick it up. So go ahead and contact us, take the advice. Again, there's no fee for the consultation. And again, review the new feature documentation between the version you're currently on and newer releases like Server 19. And most likely you'll find a feature that will make the upgrade worth it. And again, you can leverage that to justify cost.
Okay, great. Let's start going to some questions from the audience. We'll go to Jamender 2, since he submitted the question before it even began. And he wants to know, is it better to migrate from 2008 to 2012 to 2016 to 2019, or directly from 2008 all the way up to 2019? And Julian or David, I'm not sure who wants to take first crack at this.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and grab that one. So with the upgrade path, you can't go direct from 2018 to 2019. It's just not available. However, what you can do is you can kind of do a step-up process in order to get up to 2019. Now, it's kind of depend on how long you want to stick in each of those steps. There are ways to purchase essentially 2019, either retail, open license, where you can basically do an in-place upgrade straight to 2012 and then an in-place upgrade to 2016, all within about a day. I'll go ahead and link a resource over to you in that question as well. That'll help. But Microsoft came out, and this was recently, they actually put out an upgrade overview. It's basically a nice video diagram showing how you can upgrade and what you can upgrade to. The only caveat with your situation specifically is Server 2008 was the last version released as 32-bit as an option. So if your Server 08 is on 32-bit, there's no upgrade you can do. But if it's on 64, then you can technically do steps up over and over.
Kevin, can you talk to us about your migration path? What are you guys looking at as a way to get to 2019?
We're still in that exploring. In fact, that I can't even remember if that particular server is 32-bit to 64-bit. So he just brought up a nice point that I need to look at.
All right. Well, I think Trusted Tech is here to help you if you need one. All right. Let's go to another question. This one's coming from Main Strike. Leaving an SBS 2008 domain behind and not migrating, with the short time 2019 has been out, would you recommend going with the established Server 2016 or simply starting out our new domain with Server 2019 servers? Again, Julian or David, whoever wants to take that, feel free.
Yeah, you guys, I'll take this one. So you guys, it really just depends on if you're comfortable. 2008, moving into a new version of Windows Server, sometimes a little apprehensive to do so. So in this case, I typically would recommend actually Server 16 with an open licensing and then slowly rolling into Server 19 as time progresses. So that would be my recommendation. There's a ton of clients that make that jump to Server 2019. But again, I recommend typically 2016. It's a really easy migration process into 2019. So that's what I would recommend.
Okay, cool. Let's take a couple of licensing questions. We've got, let's take, I think we kind of covered this already, but Mark T94 wants to know, can you explain the difference between licensing for virtual 2019 servers between Hyper-V and VMware?
Yeah, you guys, I'll take this one as well. So you guys, it's with ESXi as your hyper-advisor versus Hyper-V. Hyper-V, you can install let's say Windows Server Standard, for example. You can install it on the host machine and you can enable the Hyper-V role. Now that'll count as one activation. You then can activate that same license in 2 virtual machines. Now with ESXi, that enacts as the host OS, so you lose that host activation and you can now install it just on 2 VMs. So that's really the only difference. Whenever the hyper-advisor is the OS, you lose the host activation. On the Windows Server side, the host activation is just primarily used to enable Hyper-V. So just about near identical.
Okay, cool. Question from George Quiet with Soul. Cal licensing historically has always been sorta on the honor system, especially for small businesses. Why would a small business invest in so many Cals? What do you guys think?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when you're looking at small businesses, this is pretty much the exact reason why Microsoft came out with Essentials. So Windows Server Essentials, it's a low-cost, out-of-the-box solution that essentially has the Cals built in, and it's built in for, like I mentioned before, up to 25 users or 50 devices, whichever comes first. And that honestly suffices for businesses up to a pretty decent size. Following that, Cals are what's considered compliance licensing, meaning that yes, it is on the honor system. It is up to you to procure the correct amount. I don't know how many of you guys have gone through SAM audits with Microsoft, but essentially, if you do things that kind of trigger red flags with Microsoft, they'll reach out, and that process, it's not an audit. It's presented as a consultation, so they'll go over with you what exactly you need to do. But commonly, we do see, and we get people who try and find ways around it. And we always do our best to advise them, hey, this is what you need to do based on your situation. But the main point is, most of the time, if you're really trying to keep the cost down that low, you can usually just slide right into Essentials and be just fine.
All right, cool. Let's take a question from the human. Julian, earlier you had mentioned the system insights for Server 19. The human wanted to know, how does this help with system monitoring? Is it giving information that previously wasn't available, or is it just kind of rearranging and displaying information available in previous versions of Server just in a different or easier way?
Yeah, you guys, primarily with where we saw this is going to be in the Windows Admin Center. So you're able to observe the metrics directly on the Windows Admin Center in a different forecasting role that's really never been seen on Server 16. So we just played around with it in Windows Admin Center. We didn't really do so much on the on-premise side. So more information to come on that side.
Okay, and then follow-up question, the human also wanted to know if you guys knew of any third-party integrations available yet for the Windows Admin Center. Is that also still to come?
Still to come. We just started playing with the feature. The evaluation was pulled off of the Microsoft side for a few months and reestablished. So we're just now diving into it over the last 3 months or so. So still more to come on that end.
All right, cool. Good to know. So let's go take a question from Berto007. Wants to know, I'm upgrading multiple servers to 2019. I'm looking at purchasing MS data center, will I be able to upgrade the current server running 2008 R2, or will I have to do a new install since the license type is different?
It's going to be the same question that we kind of had a little bit before. It's going to be a multi-step upgrade process. Because you're going up a version, then you're not going to have any issue really. You can always I try and phrase it as vertical movements and lateral movements. So if you look at the versions, the year ones, those are considered vertical movements. So you can always go up in that chain, and then lateral movements would what you'd be considered moving over. So you can always do an in-place upgrade from like a standard to a data center, but you just can't go backwards. So because you're starting with standard and then you're moving up a few levels and then over into data center, you can do that no problem. As far as what's recommended, that is a pretty big leap. As long as all of your applications are basically built to be utilized in Server 19, and then obviously best practices, make sure you back everything up before each step up, just to ensure. But as long as everything's working correctly, then it's okay.
Cool. Let's go. So I think this is a good question. So the IT guy 107 wants to know, our server 2019 cals retroactive to previous versions of Windows Server? I know that was something that they've done in previous versions of Server. Is this still available to y'all's knowledge? So David's nodding yes. Anything to elaborate on that?
Yeah, the cals, they have downgrade rights, but not upgrade rights.
Sure.
So if you purchase server with 2008 cals, then when you move up, you also have to purchase the cals. However, if you have, you invest in, say, an open license of Server 19, and it comes with 2019 cals, and you want to utilize the downgrade rights to 2018, then those cals apply there.
Mm-hmm. And so, earlier we had that question on, should you go to 2019? Should you just go 2016? A lot of folks do point out those downgrade rights to be like, well, you can always, just purchase a 2019 license and then go back. Is that something that you guys recommend, or do you guys just feel like you should just, if you're going to go, just go to 2019?
It really just depends. Sorry, David. So you guys, I think it really just depends on where you're coming from, which version. If you're on 2012 R2, I think comfort level to moving Server 19, I would make that leap. Anything older than 2012 R2, I'd probably slowly move into 2016 and then up to 2019. So it really just depends. And adding on to David's statement with the cals, so you buy open licensing today of Server 19, you have Server 19 and Server 16 2012 R2. You have your cals on Server 19. So again, those apply to Server 16 and Server 2012 R2. You can always add software assurance onto both tiers, and then that's how the cals can move to newer versions. So just a little last piece of information on that side as well.
Cool. David, anything to add to that?
No, he got it. He got it all for us.
And then Kevin, what are your thoughts? Do you feel like if someone, your recommendation, would you prefer to just go to 2019, or do you think you'd be more inclined to go to 2016, given that it's been out longer first before moving on to 2019?
Well, we have many servers, so we already have 2012 R2s. We have a 2016 running our document imaging storage. So we've been in these environments. So now we're ready to start the 19 and exploring it. And so.
All right. Very cool. All right, let's take a couple of more questions. Mike H wants to know, so if you have two 16-core CPUs in Server 2019, how do you license that? Is that 16 or is that 32?
So that's going to be 32 in total. And the reason why is because we have the two requirements we have to meet. It's a 16-core minimum, and it is 8-core minimum per CPU. And you also have to, I guess, license the total number of cores in that machine. So in your case, you would need to license a total of 32 cores.
Okay, and then we'll take one last question to go for the road. John J., is there a difference with the core licensing on virtual machines?
So you guys, again, we'll go back to a few categories back. So licensing virtual machines, you're not really licensing the actual VM. The reason being is the VM typically has less cores allocated to it than the host machine. So for every 2 VMs, you need to relicense the host. So in this example that we gave with 2 sockets, 16 cores each 2 VMs requires licensing for 32 cores. Same thing for VM 3 and 4. You need a 32-core license to license those. And then last on a little shift, Dragon's Rule. I saw some of your questions. Amazing resource in the thread. Spice says if you ever see anything from Dragon's Rule, always spot on. Something that we've seen time and time again. So.
All right, very cool. So guys, we're running out of time. Wanted to give you all one last opportunity to share some final thoughts or advice. Kevin, we'll start off with you. Did you anything that you took away from today that's going to impact your move to 2019, either from a licensing perspective or a feature perspective?
Definitely looking to see if I'm at 32-bit versus 64-bit on that server I want to migrate. Never even took that into consideration. So,
all right,
thanks on that.
Sounds good. David, any final takeaways that you have for our audience today?
I mean, honestly, I would just consistently take a look at a lot of the new features that are rolling out. Like Server 16, Server 19, they're all built on the same platform as Windows 10. Obviously, Microsoft's new push is Windows as a service. That means they're obviously being a lot more proactive in adding features throughout the product lifecycle than they ever have been before. So just because you may already have Server 19, that doesn't mean that there's going to be some cool new stuff coming out with it over the next few months, years, what have you. So it's always kind of important to keep up on the documentation because you can always find different things to help you in your business.
All right, awesome. And Julian, any final takeaways from you for the audience today?
Just give David a raise. Yeah, you guys, the Microsoft licensing on the Spicehead's engagement around Microsoft licensing is amazing. So you guys, if you have any questions, post it on there, and we'll do our best to respond to it. And again, use resources around the community. Dragon's Rule, again, is a big one that keeps popping up. So post, and then again, we'll get back to you as soon as possible.
Awesome. Very cool. All right, guys. Well, it is now time to announce the winner of our prizes. Again, thank you to everyone who's been hanging out with us today in chat and asking a lot of great questions. We didn't get to a ton, but I have no shortage of confidence that Julian and David will tackle all the questions that we didn't get a chance to get to. So we'll be sending those out. The winner of our NVIDIA graphics card today is going to be going to Artie. Congratulations, Artie. You are the winner of our prize today, which is the NVIDIA graphics card. Let us know how you like that, and send a private message to Matt Y. Let him know where you would like that graphics card shipped, and let us know what games you run on it, or if you use it to just mine Bitcoin, that's also okay. Big thank you to David and Kevin and Julian. You guys are an awesome panel today. I got a lot of really positive feedback in chat today. Everyone had a really good time and definitely learned a lot. Also, thanks to Trusted Tech team for sponsoring today's event. For more events just like the ones that you saw today, make sure to click on that orange button that says click here for upcoming shows, or just stick around until after the presentation ends. We hope to see you guys around in a future event. But until next time, guys, stay safe, keep it spicy, and we'll see you all back here next time. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, guys.